Right, we'll wait the obligatory couple of seconds. And my cat is already next to me, so he's probably going to interrupt. So sorry about that in advance.
Not a problem.
All right, okay. Dark Bleatings, everybody. Welcome to another author interview here on Happy Goat Horror. We are swiftly heading towards 50 author interviews now, Simon. So you're in the tail end of the first batch of people. And I have with me today Simon Bestwick, who some of you might know as Daniel Church. So welcome, Simon / Daniel.
Dark Bleatings, Kaylee. Hi, thanks for having me on. And Daniel says hello as well.
Yes, lovely to have you here. I have a problem pronouncing any of your books for some reason. No matter how simple the titles actually are, for some reason
I have a habit of just picking titles that are just do that to people.
It's only since talking about things in videos and on the internet that I've realized I know a lot of words just because of reading them, and I've never heard them out loud. So
it was the same for me when I was younger. The number of words that I would pronounce, I always used to say caricature instead of caricature, and things like that. And for some reason, I mean, and there was sometimes I'd read a word on the page, and how I thought it was supposed to sound. I always, for years, I pronounced when I was a kid, I used to say ricochet as riocheate, and I have no idea how my brain got from that to that. But this was like reading a Doctor Who book when I was about 7. So, I think a little bit of latitude can be allowed here.
Yes, I think that people generally forgive me. They know what I mean.
But it's kind of on me for picking all these like names that are sort of from German and Hungarian and stuff like that for novella titles.
Well, you say that, but my most recent conundrum of trying to pronounce things was, is it the ravening or the ravening?
Oh yes. Another reviewer did actually think that they assumed it was going to be involving ravens, which
Yes.
were very disappointed when there weren't any. That's some interesting reviews for that one.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're going to have to tell me how I'm actually supposed to say that word, because
it is the ravening, as in ravenous.
Yes. See, now I thought that first, and then I doubted myself, so I've just said it differently every time I've talked about it, and
But it was I originally called it Bone Walker because that seemed to sum up, the thing. And then I thought, well, first of all, because the Hollows was originally called Tatterskin, and my agent said, well, I think we should come up with a different title because you're kind of giving away, because that's the Tatterskins are the critters in it, and you kind of giving stuff away there. And basically, I think the theory was that the kind of titles that were kind of in right then was the sort of like the something. So hence we came up with the Hollows, and I kind of when it came to the plus which that bloody much the name the Bone Walker kind of popped into my head as soon as I visualized the creature. One Google search later, I discovered it's the name of a thing in an RPG, and I don't know how many. I mean, it was like okay, the skull walker boat. Every goddamn thing was in an RPG or an Xbox game or something, and it's like, fuck it, I'm going to call it the Bone Walker. And I even think I put in a line in the end where she's like, I'm sure that's the name of one of a critter in one of Holly's computer games, just to kind of get around it. But it couldn't be called Bone Walker because then every time somebody made a Google search, they'd come up with a load of completely unrelated stuff. So
that is the ongoing eternal peril of everyone that writes is Googling something that you're like, oh, I've had such a good idea, and then you Google it, and it's not the thing that you've thought of, but it's the same wording or something, and yeah, you have to think about the Googling.
Yeah. Yes.
So, for people who are unfamiliar with your work, just before we go on into my more specific questions, do you want to tell people a little bit about what kind of fiction that you write?
Well, principally horror of one kind or another. It tends to be supernatural. It can be psychological. There's also, I mean, I've written 3 novels called in a series called The Black Road, which there is horror in there, but there's also kind of post-apocalyptic action. It's set like 20 years after a nuclear attack, so it's very influenced by things like Threads, which I still think is one of the most terrifying horror films I've ever seen in my life. I watched it when in about 2005 when I was in my early 30s, and it terrified me then. If I'd actually seen it in 1984 when it came out at the height of the Cold War when I was 10, I might never have had a writing career because I would still be like rocking to and fro in the corner of a padded room somewhere, you know, Bestwick Psychiatric Hospital. But I digress. But anyway, yeah, the Black Road is sort of there's kind of elements of action thriller. There's the post-apocalyptic stuff, the dystopian stuff, and there's some good old-fashioned Lovecraftian horror thrown into the mix with that one. But with other stuff, it tends to be more supernatural horror. And the last couple of novels that I've done as Daniel Church have kind of come out of a bit of a folk horror element. That's not necessarily where everything I'm going to be doing is going to be, but it's done me all right so far. And I suppose Black Mountain, which was written as Simon Bestwick, is kind of a folk horror one as well, set in the land of my fathers, North Wales, and having had a lot of great fun there. Didn't get to spend as much time sort of going to Bala for research purposes, as I would have liked, but had a great deal of fun writing that. And yeah, I've written a couple of novellas, Rothsteyer and Jaeger. Save you trying to puzzle out the pronunciation there. Which are kind of around an immortal lesbian assassin from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who now works as a nurse in Manchester, as you do. So that's I just do weird stuff, basically. Usually horror, but sometimes just weird.
Well, my favorite thing, I think, about your style, your storytelling style that I've picked up on across a few of your books now is that the very character-centric stories, so they feel like you've like really zeroed in on how everything is affecting like your protagonist, so it feels like a really well contained like little story, but also the scope of the stuff that's going on is enormous. Like, so that I think that's my favorite thing about how you tell your stories, is that when you actually think about what's going on, these could be like worldwide, universe-wide problems or things that are going on, but you manage to keep it very specific to the people that it's happening to or that are involved at the time. And I'm very character focused as a reader, so I really appreciate how you manage to, like, you forget that these are like cataclysmic things. Especially in, I'm gonna say it wrong even though you've just said it. Roth
Rothsteyer.
Steyer, thank you, Rothsteyer. So that's a novella, and I found it even more like skillful how you managed to do it there, because it's a shorter form storytelling than a novel as well, but it felt like it could have been a series of books. And it's yes, we have we don't want to give any spoilers, but we have an immortal nurse, and going about her life, and then things from her past, people from her past start appearing, and so like we find out about her as we're going along. And I thought I like that you kept your cards to your chest until quite near the end about why she's immortal, because it was so creative. And usually the second I realize, oh, this person's immortal or they've lived a really long time or something, I usually think, oh, it's going to be a vampire, because that's usually what it is. And I'm not saying it was or wasn't, but I will say that the origin story of this character was so far beyond anything that I could have imagined. Or like, it took what felt like a really localized story and made it huge scope wise. And how did you, I hate asking questions like this, but I have to ask, like, did you have this origin story like the whole time, or were you working it out as you were? How
Well,
did you put this together?
I wrote a sort of an abortive short story some years ago about on the same premise, actually called Rothstein, but didn't really get it. I didn't feel I'd done it justice, but I kind of went back to, and basically I started with the title because I do a bit of a thing when it comes to guns. They pop up a lot in my work, and possibly I've kind of realized because I've been rereading a lot of Sean Hudson lately, who I read a lot of back in the '80s when I was a teenager, and I've kind of one of these things where it's like it became very into sort of like, oh, Sean Hudson, but it's like I read loads of his stuff and rereading some of these books. It's like, Christ Almighty, the images from these books, which I think I read one which is Progeny, which is a sequel to Spawn, and I haven't read Spawn since maybe at most the '90s, and all it's amazing how many details from that book were vivid in my mind, were still vivid in my mind. So it's like he obviously did something right. But yeah, guns pop up there a lot, and yeah, the makes and models. And yeah, I was also very into spy thrillers and stuff like that. And people often tended to have their own like trademark gun, like James Bond had his Walther PPK. So I would be going through handbooks on firearms, looking for one that no one had used before, in an effort to sort of like, okay, I'm going to give him one of these because. So I just immersed myself in these things, and the Rothsteier was like it was the first automatic pistol to be adopted by a major, the army of a major world power, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as was, and it comes from that sort of like late 19th, early 20th century when automatic pistols were very new and people were still figuring out how was the best way to design one. So you get all these guns that look really, really wonderfully weird, like something out of like something like quite steampunky kind of thing. And I just kind of started with the title because I thought I just love that name and I want to use it for something. Okay, how do I do something? And there's a premise to, oh god, it's kind of hard to talk about it without going into without spoiling the
Yeah.
nature of what's going on here. But the idea is that these particular there's this pistol and a few others like it can do a particular thing, can kill a particular kind of thing that ordinary guns from our own time can't. It's and so it was the idea of like, okay, you've got people trying to kill each other with these ancient pistols. Why are they doing it? And that led me to kind of like start digging into the history of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which as you do when you
Yeah,
have a stuff
naturally.
in I get fascinated with history, and if you go on Wikipedia, it's very easy. So suddenly you've got 15 tabs open because you've been opening all these hyperlinks, and suddenly you come away with this kind of you're basically talking the hind legs off people about this. Oh yes, yeah, well, yeah, it's the Meiling incident and blah blah. And they're like, yeah, popping their eyelids open with matchsticks. Please God, somebody make him shut up.
Yeah, my
So I
cousin
just.
knows that feeling well.
I don't know if I am on the autism spectrum. It has been suggested by a couple of people, and I did do like a sort of there was a questionnaire on one NHS trust. If you answer more than if you answer yes to more than 4 or 5 of these things, you may well be. And I did about 7. Yeah, and I ran these past Kate as well. Just it's not just me, is it? She's like, oh my god, she was like, you can't be autistic. Autistic is like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man. That's not you. Oh, actually, yeah, that does sound a bit. So of course, this whole thing of focusing obsessively on one thing and deep diving into it and not being
Yeah.
happy till you know it inside out is very. But that the Habsburg Empire is this fascinating kind of thing. This huge empire that covered most of Europe had all these different parts, nationalities in it, and was in some ways incredibly, in terms of the arts and stuff, it was incredibly sophisticated, and in others it was incredibly, reactionary and oppressive. So it was this kind of fascinating mixture and contradiction, and of course you've got these wonderfully ornate and weird kind of sounding names. Which you probably encountered a few of in the course of and it was just great fun going through them. Okay, I've got all these fantastically because it concluded so many nationalities: Hungarian, German, Czech, you name it. So there was just like this collage. So it was great fun to sort of just faff around in that. And yeah, it came together sort of bit by bit out of that. And yeah, so sticking with Valerie's voice, the narrator's voice, became sort of kind of the way through it. Because as you say, I mean, I don't think it's an accident that my stuff is very character centered. I mean, I did once train to be an actor, so there's possibly a bit of that rubbing off. But as well, whenever you're dealing, all these big, huge events happen to people. They happen to ordinary individual people, whether you're a general or a president or some poor bugger whose house is getting bulldozed or bombed or whatever. And the only way any of us experience what's going on in the world is through our own five senses. You know, through what we hear, what other people tell us, and what we perceive for ourselves. So it's the only way you can kind of experience, and it's the only way you can kind of deliver it. And it's always kind of mediated through your own subjective, you know, like, you know, whatever the rights and wrongs of, say, of the Second World War are. If you're some poor bugger in some poor civilian in one or the other countries getting bombed or massacred, it's the experience is pretty much the same. And even if you're on the wrong side, you know, it's still, you know, you can still have the horror of seeing your family wiped out or whatever. So you've got all of that. It's like that parable of the blind men and the elephant. They're all touching the same thing, but they can only perceive that one small part of it. So that's how it is. And with horror, especially with things like ghost stories, again, it's so much of it is about subjectivity. So much of it is, I mean, if you read a lot of Ramsey Campbell's short stories, there's all that people are always kind of, there was a rustling sound, obviously a bush in the wind, except, oh, hang on, the wind's not blowing, so of course we know that ain't no bush. But what people's brains do, we rationalize stuff, we try and fit it into what we already know, and you know, we do not automatically jump to the conclusion of there is a bug-eyed monster round the corner. But there's a part of us that sort of thinks, well, what if there is? There's been some work done on the idea that, you know, there's a if you pick up a sound, if you see something or hear something which potentially could be some kind of threat, then, you know, it's a much lower risk to act to avoid the threat, even if there isn't one, than it is to pretend, oh no, there is obviously no threat, and keep on going, because that's when the bug-eyed monster jumps out and then gets you, kind of thing.
That I thought that actually that particular sense I thought you utilized really well in the novella, because yes, our main character starts feeling like, oh, I think that someone I know has turned back up here, and I don't know why. Well, we don't know why. She has a good idea why. And that idea of like that paranoia of, like, you don't know, like, you know that they're there somewhere, they're gonna turn up, and you don't know when, how, where exactly, what's gonna happen and things. And I just think that's a feeling of anyone who's ever walked alone at night and then thought they heard footsteps and turned around and there's no one there will know that kind of feeling. So it's like it's very specific to the character, but also weirdly universal as a feeling that most of us would be able to identify and like pull from. And you could have just kept this as a story. Like, you could have just kept it completely mysterious. She's been alive a long time, and I'm not going to tell you why, and you can just yourselves. Because the main story really was about her trying to keep a hold of her life as she has it now, because she's got a wonderful partner. It's like she's enjoying a nice life with her job and her partner, their home and everything. And I guess that's what I picked up on, is like the fear that this stuff could be taken away from you, and for various reasons. A lot of people are feeling that right now as well. That's kind of a unfortunately universal feeling for a lot of different reasons.
I mean, at the time I wrote it, it was before a lot of the really awful shit that's going on now is going on, but it was, you know, a few years after Brexit. It was and you know, Trump's first term, so there was all this kind of, and there was just this kind of, I mean, she has a line where it feels like, you know, because she's seen a lot. She's seen both world wars, and she's seen what has been a comparatively long period of peace and stability in Europe, certainly in Europe. And now it's kind of like, it feels like the pendulum's swinging back. I can see all these old dark things. I've seen this shit before, and it doesn't end well. Kind of resurfacing. So it probably earthed a lot of that stuff for me. But I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, in terms of revealing the origin story and everything, it all, as I say, the whole origin of this story, this whole thing started with me wanting to write a story about a gun, and so I had to find a reason for this gun, this particular very old, out of date gun with ammunition that would be incredibly hard to find these days. Why is that? You know, why are people being shot with that now? So
Yeah.
it was kind of retconned almost from that, this whole reason for why these are so important. And then, so of course that becomes about, well, so if it's to kill these people, how do these people become as they are, that they need this to kill them? And so yeah, and yeah, I it's not that I don't like vampire stories, but I kind of I've not written, I think, very many straight vampire stories, mainly because I kind of need to feel I was doing something different with
Yeah,
it.
I'm the same with everyone knows that I absolutely love zombies. They're my total favorite, but I think I've written like 2 shorts where I've used zombies, and I haven't done anything longer because I don't have anything to add to, like, I don't have anything new to do with it. So I refrained, but yeah,
Yeah.
I was really just so taken with this book and impressed by it and recommending it to everybody because you could have just kept this as a story about a woman whose past is catching up with her. But then you decided you made the genius decision to fill in a crucial part of her past, which you didn't need to do it for the story. I don't like, um, although it is my favorite part of the story, but you know what I mean? Like, the story worked without it, is what I mean.
It's the straight horror part of the story.
Oh my God. I got to it and I was so like, I was already like, this was already a 5-star read for me, and then I hit this part and I was like, what in the Clive Barker? And I always mean that as a massive compliment because
I take that as a massive compliment.
like, because I've only recently, in recent years, discovered Clive Barker, and I just can't believe I wasn't reading him for my entire life because his thinking about how he uses horror and
Yeah.
what to do with it is so out of the box. And like, I didn't realize how unique Clive Barker's brand of horror is and how much it's influenced like the whole genre. But that's what this felt like to me. Oh, sorry, my husband thinks he's funny. Just brought me some water and I can't possibly explain because it's an inside joke. Sorry, Simon.
That's all right. I've got a couple of cans of Pepsi Max here. That's how I fuel myself.
Sorry, yes. So as I was saying, sorry, my cat is now interfering as well. All the men in the house are interfering with this interview.
You obviously need to get them both fixed.
Yes, that's the problem. It just opened up the story into this whole other realm of horror that I didn't even realize it was in, and I'd love to talk about it more, but I really don't want to spoil it for anyone that's going to pick the book up because it's so
Maybe we should do a bit. Maybe we should do a bit at the end. It's like, okay, this is the first part was the spoiler-free bit. Now we
yeah. It was so entertaining where you went with this for her origin that I was like, I could not possibly have conceived of this myself. And then the way that you like described everything, I really felt the horror. And because I read almost exclusively horror and I have for decades, I don't often feel like surprised and weirdly horrified in a cosmic sense. And I was like, even though obviously this is like part of her past, so I knew where she was now, so I knew she was going to come out of this.
Yeah.
I was still really scared about what was going to happen because it was just so like mind-bendingly horrific of a son. Like, I just thought, well, I wouldn't have done it. I would have run away.
Yes.
Too scary. But yeah, I just thought, yeah, it was already like a 5-star great character story with mysterious elements for me, and like obviously the personal stakes for her own life, and you know, the people in her life and everything, and then you hit this and it just really elevated it even more. So yeah, well, really, that's just me gushing about the book. I just really loved it. So what
Gushing
everyone
away.
can
It's
read
very,
it.
very nice that people enjoyed it. You know, it's not quite like anything I'd done before. So it wasn't quite straight up horror. So I kind of hoped it landed with at least some people, and I'm very glad it did. Um, I think that I've had a few people sort of who I had at least one person who was like, please write more. I want to find out about them, catching around in the Weimar Republic. And I was like, I don't do this fan service nonsense. Then I was like, Weimar Republic, you say? Actually. So it was just that found its way into Jaeger, the second book, which which was a different sort of different, a bit of a different beast, but it was still great fun to do. I might write about it again.
Oh yay! No,
Uh,
it was just such a fun direction for a horror fan. It was so much fun, like where you took that story, and the you're gonna have to like hear me out on this comparison, because when I say it, you're gonna be like, what? But this was the same sort of delighted surprise that I had when I read Womb by Duncan Ralston. And I have to
read
stress
that
these
book,
books.
and so I don't. I've heard of it. I've heard it's like extreme horror is pretty much the only thing I've heard. I've heard in connection with it. I haven't read it, but I know a lot of people have really liked it, and other people think the author should be locked up. So
I don't think that Duncan would argue with that. But for people who've read Womb, I have to stress that these stories are nothing alike at all. They're completely different branches of fiction, of horror, everything. But I just remember reading Womb and thinking, wait a minute, this is meant to be extreme horror, and I haven't really hit any extreme horror. And then you get to like the last bit, and I was absolutely crying with how far he went all of a sudden. Like, and it wasn't out of left field because he was building to it, but I just didn't see it coming. And I had a similar feeling of like, oh, this is quite light on the horror, but it's a really good story. And then you like get to that end, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. In terms of uh pulling elements out of the bag, I'm gonna segue now into The Ravening, which you published under Daniel Church,
yeah,
which is a novel that I also loved and recommended to everybody when I read it. For the similar reason of I thought I knew what kind of story I was reading, and then you changed things up. I reckon about a third of the way in, it went in a completely different direction to the kind of story I thought you were writing, but you did set it up so it wasn't like out of left field. But yeah,
yeah. It's been a bit of a Marmite book, this one. With
really,
with the Hollows, a lot of people, the majority of people loved it, or at least thought, felt they hadn't wasted their time on it. There was a tiny few bad reviews of the Hollows, some of which were hilarious, and we'll probably come back to at some point. But with the Ravening, it's really much more divided. I mean, part of it, I think, is the character of Jenna. Some people find her, absolutely, just so such a good, she's such a complete arsehole that they think she's unbearable, and other people are like, well, yes, she's quite abrasive, but there are reasons for that, and
mm,
if you can get on board with that. Some people felt the relationship rang true, and some people said this is not. Admittedly, one of the bad reviews, well, I have issues with men writing relationships between women. It's like, well, in that case, I don't care what you think, if there's nothing I can do about that. But yeah, part of it was the characters, but part of it was the way. I think possibly a lot of people went in, and maybe the back cover blurb is something to do with it. There's always that thing with how much do you obviously don't want to give all the stuff that's coming away, but you need to give people, you need to really give people an idea
mm,
of what they're in for, which is a very tricky line to walk. And I think I think some people picked up The Ravening thinking this was going to be a certain kind of novel. That's the kind of novel it seems like for the first third or so, and then we're just not on board for that left turn. Some people were and loved it. some people weren't, and because of that, or because they don't like Jenna, or for whatever reason, absolutely. I did one recurring complaint in a lot of reviews was how many bloody times does Holly say "babe" in the course of that book. And if they've got one of the advanced, if they were reading one of the advanced reading copies, it was one thing I did get pulled up on shortly before release this. There really is a lot of the word "babe" gets used like a lot in this. It was kind of like a thing with, because she just hear kind of like an internal monologue where she's kind of imagining what Holly would say to her, and that's usually identified by adding this. I mean, I kind of maybe a bit lazily by having her say "come on, baby" or whatever, but it just means it going like "babe, babe, 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 babe."
A lot of us talk like that, though.
Hmm?
A lot of us talk like that.
Well, we do. I mean, there's always that thing of being, of sort of like, yeah, this is people don't talk like this, people do talk like this, and sometimes, some people just got very annoyed by it. But I'm very glad you're one of the people who really liked it. It was had a bit of a bump. It was a bit of a I had a bit of a struggle trying to get it together. There was a lot of cutting and chopping and changing in the because you've got the first couple of chapters, and then you jump forward to like 15 years. And originally I'd written some sort of material, some chapters to go in between that. And it was just kind of like, oh, for goodness sake, when is the actual story going to get started? I just make the jump. And I think, again, maybe that threw a few people as well. Some of the stuff I wrote got used in flashbacks, like to her school days, which is where possibly some of the things I would have kind of liked to have done to some of my playground bullies. It would have been worth getting expelled just to pound the living shit out of certain people.
Well, I do want to talk about the story a little bit more, but since you brought it up, I would like to talk a little bit about your relationships that you write into your books, because that's something that I think that you actually do really well. And as a lady reading, women in relationships with other women, and I am by myself, and I always complain that I don't see like a lot of bisexual representation, good or bad. Like I'm seeing, it's just you just don't come across it very often, and this is something I whinge about to people because and when I do see it normally, it's I guess there's a complaint to be made sometimes about men writing women in relationships with women.
There was always that.
If it feels like the author has come at it from a sort of like almost fetishy place, but I don't find that with your writing. They just feel like authentic relationships to me.
I mean, I made a point. I mean, I didn't find out until I didn't realize it for myself until I was working on the The Sound of the Dark, which also has a relationship between two women in it. But I'm kind of the penny finally dropped. It's like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm actually bi. Which is why the book I wrote, the most recent horror novel I finished, which is currently under consideration with someone, is rampantly gay, with some fairly explicit scenes of uphill gardening. So I mean, there were. I mean, of course, one of the trickiest scenes in the Ravening there is a sex scene between the two characters. And when I was writing it, it was originally going to be, and now let us draw a veil, and move on to the sort of how was it for you, babe, kind of bit afterwards. But it was kind of like, because through all the time that we'd seen the characters up until that point, they'd always been either butting heads over something or struggling desperately to get out, and it was kind of like, this is the only time we actually get to see them properly happy and in love and with each other. And so it kind of wrote itself, and but it was very much this kind of thing of, it's a very difficult. I mean, sex is notoriously difficult to write at the best of times.
Yeah.
When you're a man writing a scene between two women, it's really worrisome. And I had about, I mean, I always have plenty of B2s, but I had about three women who were bi or queer themselves, and said, well, would you mind having a read of this? I value your opinion on the book overall, but particularly with an eye to the relationship. And the only notes I got from any of them about the shower scene is, you don't want to get any soap in there, basically.
Yeah.
soap in your otter pocket are not a good mix, was what one of them said. That phrase immediately found its way into my notebook to be used at a later stage. I did actually have to do some rewrites on that chapter about a week before we went to press. Everything, it had gone through. The beta readers had gone through my agent, who's in a relationship with another woman as well. It went through everyone, and it basically got to the stage of some of the advanced reading copies went out, and especially in the States, there was some pushback from some readers there who were basically suddenly saying this is male gaze, fetishization, and it was like, I think we need to rewrite it and tone it down. And that was, I mean, I'm normally very good at turning down rewrites. That was the most difficult one for me, because it's kind of like, it's not because I've not done it right. It's because, it's not because the book, we need to do some work to make the book work better as the book it's supposed to be. It's kind of like we're fiddling around with something that's actually okay. And it probably would have been easier if someone had said that to me at an earlier stage, I'd have been like, okay, right, I'll fix it now. But to jump through all the hoops and to feel like you pulled it off, and then having to look at it again was probably a bit more of a gut punch. But it got done, and it's fairly. it's not too coy as it
No, but for what it's worth, so I don't get male gaze from it, for what that's worth. And also, it should be said that I am an insane prude when I'm reading. And so if I'm coming upon any sort of sex scene, I'm like, oh no, like I always prefer that they're just not in the book, because for some reason, even though I'm just reading to myself, I get embarrassed, right? But I did not find, so even from someone like me, I did not find this scene egregious. And also, I thought it worked. I thought it served a character point in that our main character is very, she's got barriers up,
Yeah.
and emotionally, and this is, this kind of activity with, partners, it's very intimate, and that's when you're very vulnerable with people. And so to me, this read like, she really likes this girl, and this is like how she's expressing that. So like I didn't get male gaze, or just for the sake of a male writer wanting to write one of these scenes from it. I thought it worked for the story. And yeah, that's for anyone who's listening or watching this, who's like me, like you don't need to worry. Like I thought it was fine.
It's about 3 pages. I actually, because I give my folks a copy of every book I write, and this was the only one where I was like, yeah, Mum, you might want to. I just actually wrote a couple of little, like, page 266. The things get a bit frisky here. You may want to skip forward a bit. Okay, so you can read it again now, Mum.
Yeah, I've read much more explicit straight scenes that served no purpose whatsoever, that were just lodged in there because
someone was
like, oh,
back in the 80s when you were reading a book. It was like there was all, James Herbert, and of course Sean Hudson. There was got to be a very explicit shagging, at least in a couple of parts of the book. I mean, admittedly, much as I've kind of like rediscovered a great fondness for Sean Hudson. I do remember, I think a lot of the sex scenes when I read them, I was like, because he's quite. You don't put that in your mouth. Oh God, I'm only going to ever have sex, strictly for the purposes of having children. That's it. I think there's one of his books where there are a couple who were like 69ing in bed, and she bites it off, which was kind of like, oh, okay, yes, I am. I think he probably did he may well have done a fair bit for done a little bit to help reduce the spread of STDs there, because I think a few people may well have read that and be like, you know what, I think I'll just I'll just read a good book.
Yeah, scenes like that will make you be like, I'm only doing it. With any luck, I'll only have to do it one time. That'll be fine. Yeah, I really the other thing I think the other reason that I think that you write these relationships really well is because it didn't occur to me until the most recent book that this is something you've done a few times. Like I wasn't like, oh, he writes a lot of
Okay,
female
women.
relationships. It occurred to me the last time when I was like looking at my notes, and I was like, oh yeah. So, and it has been more noticeable to me with other authors where it has felt a little bit like some sort of wish fulfillment or something. So like,
kind of thing, yeah.
yeah.
I like writing I like writing female characters. It's just it's a thing. I mean, I'm thinking about a lot of my best friends. I've probably got more close friends who are women than
Mhm.
who are men, and I quite enjoy. I like writing female, and of course another thing is because it's often involving, especially in horror narratives, unless I don't do very many damsel in distress kind of
Mhm.
situations in the street. Well, partly, of course, Jenna is kind of in it. That's another reason. Obviously, she had to, in a way, she had to be bi because she has to have been in a situation where because she could have got pregnant on the one hand without meaning to, and on the other hand, she may need help, she may need rescuing, and I did not want, you know, fear not, helpless girl, the big strong man will come in. If she was going to be rescued, it was going to have to be by another woman, and so that was kind of a thing when I was working it out, and so it's kind of like, well, that in a way that works, but yeah, it just means I like writing female characters, and of course if it is a relationship between two women, you then don't have the problem of because people do often tend to read things in where if, oh, she had to be rescued by a man, so obviously he's being sexist and betraying women as well. So,
Well,
although one of my favorite one-star reviews for the Hollows was a guy who complained because basically um all the men are either horrible or stupid or useless. And at the end, which isn't true, but at the end when they at the end of the Hollows, it's like about 3 or 4 women are going out to face the evil, and they're all women. I mean, I like strong female characters. I love Ripley, but this is just not realistic. It's just woke propaganda, and I was surprised that the writer was actually a man. And I thought, oh, you poor little chap, wait till you read the Ravening. But
I, you only have to have a story with good female characters in it now for someone to say that it's woke propaganda and not just somebody writing women into stories. Um, I mean Jenna is in distress for a lot of this story, but I'd never describe her as a damsel in distress. It's not a damsel in distress story because she is not someone that. So I'm very very mild spoilers about where the story doesn't go. So you've been warned, everyone. But so I'm not going too far into the book. But so initially we've got Jenna finds out that she's pregnant just from a kind of nothingy ex that she didn't put any stock into that relationship, and then she is abruptly kidnapped, and it becomes very clear that it's very important that she's pregnant. And I thought, oh, cool, this is going to be like a pregnancy horror story. And I was down for that because I love those kinds of stories, but it does take a different turn. But at no point did I think, oh, yeah, she's just going to put up with being trapped in a place. And like, she's very.
Jenna does not put up with anything.
I guess I can see why people found her abrasive, but I really liked the character because she can be a bit of a dick, but also there is no reason why in those circumstances she should be being nice to anybody.
Oh,
So
she's got a lot of rage and a lot of anger, a lot of pain kind of bottled up looking for that, and which makes her very difficult, can make her very difficult for a lot of people to be around. At the same time, it's also kind of kind of useful that she's got that when she's thrown into this, because she needs to be someone who's extremely aggressive and defiant in many respects to get through a lot of the stuff she's dealing with.
yeah,
Um,
she's got the perfect kind of personality for a scenario like this.
Yes. Terrible personality, terrible personality for everyday life, but a shit like this she's just built for.
I gotta say, if I kidnapped Jenna, I'd spend about 5 minutes and think, I don't think it's worth it, guys. Let's just
Throw her
back off.
Throw her back in.
What? Well, I've just realised we have to wrap up shortly, Simon. But I would like to know, what kind of horror would you say, or what kind of stories got you into horror, and has your taste in what you like to read and watch changed over time, or do you still gravitate to what first got you into the genre in the first place?
Oh, wow, now you're asking. Well, I mean, what did start me off? I mean, possibly watching Tom Baker era Doctor Who may well have been a part of it. And I started reading the novelizations by Terrance Dicks. There were a lot of them in my local library. I kind of branched out from there. I was always into anything horrific, and to an extent, science fiction as well. I kind of saw them as all kind of overlapping a lot with each other. So I would read anything like that. And my granddad had this great big book of classic horror stories. It was Edgar Allan Poe, Algernon Blackwood, Ambrose Bierce, all these writers. No M.R. James and no Lovecraft. I didn't read them until much, much later. So I grew up on a lot of that, but I also, at the same time, I was also, as soon as I could, I was reading lots of pulpy horror novels, like Diane Smith and James Herbert, and of course Sean Hudson. I started reading Sean Hudson because he did a novelization of The Terminator, which I remember seeing trailers to The Terminator. Oh, that looks really cool. No way I'm going to get to see that, but there's a book. This was in the days before VCRs on the whole, so I grabbed the book. He's written other stuff. Cool. Slugs. Spawn. Whoa. Now there's a book that stays in your, a bunch of. I still remember back in the 90s, talking to my late friend Joel Lane. This was, of course, at a stage when horror was just not, no publishers were wanting to touch that, and so a lot of very good horror writers were without a mainstream publisher. But Sean Hudson was still, he kind of repackaged what he was doing as kind of brightly dark, kind of crime and thriller. And I said that wouldn't work with all his back catalogue. You couldn't really take a story about three, abortions that come back to life and start killing people and package that as a crime thriller. There was a long pause, and then he said, "No, but you could get them jobs in the Conservative Party." And kind of like, oh my God, I think we finally have an explanation for William Hague. Anyway, that's just a side note. But yes, I read a lot of Sean Hudson and stuff like that. But I was reading both pan books of horror and the kind of more classic stuff. And I went through a phase in my late teens when I kind of got very snobby and decided all genre fiction was rubbish, and I was going to be a proper artist, darling. I was reading. I was going to also write plays and scripts and stuff, and so I was into a lot of that. But in my final year at uni, well, I mean, in between, to be fair, early 90s, I picked up in Nick Royle's Darklands, which was kind of like, oh, yes, horror can be proper art, darling, if you want it to be. But then, like in my final year at uni, we were in Scarborough. There was a play we did at college that got picked for the National Student Drama Festival. And I was at a loose end, and I picked up a Sean Hudson novel. And I was very into Sam Peckinpah films at the time. And of course, Peckinpah is a huge influence on Hudson. His characters are these fucked up, misanthropic, twisted obsessives who do terrible things in the pursuit of their obsession. So of course, it's like, oh, I'm really into this. And I just ended up binging a load of his stuff. And after I left college and had to work in a crappy job and was trying to find a way to write something, I kind of found myself kind of like, horror, more horror. Let's read more of this. Sean Hudson, Darklands. What else have we got? And just kind of started reading much more Stephen King, Ramsey Campbell, everything I could lay my hands on. So I think I kind of narrowed my focus to more sort of classic ghost stories in the early 2000s, and then kind of remembered there was actually so much more to the genre. I'm always trying to read more. There is a lot of stuff I go back to, and as I said, I've been rediscovering my passion for Sean Hudson. And like I said, people can mock his the crudities of his Can say his style's crude, his characterization's crude, whatever. The fact is that I can't stop turning the pages on these bloody things. I keep downloading. I keep thinking, I've got these other books I should be reading. Oh yes, but there's one more I haven't read or I want to read. We'll just download that. And I just keep going. And as I said, there's stuff I've read a while back. I haven't read it probably about 20, 30 years, and it's like, oh, I remember that bit. Yes, that image is very, very vivid in my memory. So he clearly is doing something right. I try not to lose touch with stuff that I've read in the past. It's good and it's good to sort of go back and rediscover it. But obviously, there's loads of great new stuff happening as well, and you kind of want to read that and see what's happening and be aware of, read as widely as you can, because obviously you need to, your own work needs to keep evolving and growing and not just repeating itself and finding a new box to kind of get out of. Yeah. I don't think there's any. I would have probably said I'd grown out of Sean Hudson, but I clearly haven't. So
well, a lot of us are Sean Hudson fans. I remember going to a horror convention, and he was there, and my friend was like, "Oh my God, Sean Hudson's here." And I was like, oh, I don't think I've read Sean Hudson. And then when I was re-looking at all of the books I read as a teenager, like when I got into like point horror and stuff, I realized, oh my God, I think I've read all the Sean Hudson. But because I wasn't paying attention to who the authors were when I was a teenager. So, and then all of a sudden I just, like, all of these books came flooding back to me. So I didn't remember that Sean had written them, but I very vividly remembered the books, the stories, and I must have read hundreds of those when I was a teenager. But his stuff does stay with you. So yeah.
he's actually provided a quote for my next Daniel Church book, The Sound of the Dark. The quote is, "This guy is a better horror writer than Sean Hudson."
So you're that's quite an endorsement.
That is brilliant. I only fell off my chair laughing when I read that. It's like, oh yes, please ask them to put that on the jacket. That's brilliant. I love it.
So just for anyone that missed it, what's your upcoming book called?
That's called The Sound of the Dark.
When's it out?
That will be out in October.
Woohoo! Nice Halloween time read then.
It will be. Yes. And it is again, it's a bit of a different beast from the other two. There are possibly folk horror elements in it, but there's some different stuff as well. I think this one's possibly a bit more slow building. I think the protagonist is, but the people, anyone who found Jenna a bit much, will probably get on a lot better with the protagonist of this one. But she also has considerable backbone, as it turns out. So there's some characters in that I really enjoyed writing, both good and bad. It's really nice when you just feel the characters kind of come to life and start talking to themselves, and it's like, you know what, I'm just going to let them keep on rattling on for the entire this chapter will probably be about 3 times as long as it will be in the final cut, but there are far too many good lines to sort of not let them at least get it off their chest, kind of thing. It's essentially the story is that the main character, Callie, there's a true crime podcast, and she's dealing with various things. She's dealing with depression and in a crap relationship with an idiot bloke, nowhere near as bad as Jenna's ex in The Ravening, but still struggling. And she starts investigating this particular case, which is a family annihilation back in the 1980s. A guy who was an artist who was this kind of like loving husband, doting father, and yet one day he killed his wife and children, and then set the caravan on fire and shot himself. And the only kind of clue is that he scrawled on the wall, on one bit of undamaged wall, the words "World's End." And so she starts digging, talking to the guy's family, and begins to unearth something of this project he was doing, an installation, like an avant-garde installation that revolved around this old abandoned airfield at a place called Warden Fell. And it turns out that what happened to him is now in danger of happening to her. And I think people will. I think people, and a lot of it happens. It takes place in Wales as well.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm sure everyone else is. I will put your information, your all of your author stuff, the books we've talked about in the description so that people can find the stuff easily if you want to pick up anything that we've mentioned or stalk Simon online like I do. Last question. Oh, only mildly, Simon. I'm not in the bushes outside your house or anything, I swear.
Oh, okay. That's that. Peers out the window nervously.
Last question. If there are people who haven't read any of your books so far here, where would you recommend they start with your work? Is there a good starting place?
Well, let's see. For Daniel Church, obviously, I think probably start with The Hollows. That's out there, and everyone seems to love that. Well, most people. There's from the Simon Bestwick side of the fence. I'm really proud of a little novella I did called A Different Kind of Light, which is from Black Shuck books, same people who did Rothschild and Jaeger. That is more of a straight up horror one, but hopefully it will scare the living crap out of people. I hope so. Anyway, I hope that's the effect that seems to be effect it had on some people. And novel wise from Simon Bestwick, I would probably point them towards Black Mountain, which is my sort of kind of almost like a serial thriller type novel. That's again set in North Wales, in the mysterious Bala Triangle, where all sorts of weird and wonderful things happen.
Yeah, well, I think those are good recommendations. From me, my opinion, I don't really think that you can go wrong. I think great characters, great out of the box horror is what I would describe your work as, Simon. Just so when you're pleasantly surprised by just horrors that you didn't even know could be thought of. So yeah, I don't think you could go wrong. Thank you so much again for doing this. It's been really fun to, grill you a little bit about your work.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to be grilled.
And we will great to be grilled. That'll be the title of the video. It's great to be grilled. We will bid everyone a goodbye now, and I'll see you guys all in the week with other videos and next week with another author interview. But be sure to check out Simon's work in the links in the description, and we will sign off with our classic sign off of bleed.